Hi, Chris. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Lisa. It's good to be here. Welcome back. I know you've been out for a little while. It's nice to see you.
Yes, I have. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see everybody or to know that you're out there. Lisa with Wisdom from the Edge. I'm here with my dear friend and co-host, Chris, and we are here to push the envelope and talk about things that I think other people are talking about. But of course, we have our own perspective from the lenses in which we view life. And I have been out for about 6 weeks. So we tried a couple times to say, "Hey, let's do this. I'm fine," and then all of a sudden, I was starting to cough. So I feel like I am finally better.
You're back. You're looking good. You're sounding good.
Thank
So
you.
let's
Thank you.
let's do it. Let's dive into another
Let's do it.
fun topic. And I know you got a really interesting one today, and I'm sure our audience is gonna
I,
enjoy sinking their teeth into this one.
okay, so I have been fascinated with the subject of prayer and the difference between prayer and meditation, if there is a difference. And so I decided to do a little digging. And I have done this over the course of the last several years. But I don't know, since I was really knocked on my butt for a few weeks and had a lot of time on my hands to just lay in contemplation and realize that there was a lot of things that I was spending a lot of time doing in my life, a lot of busy time, a lot of time that required me to stop listening to the whispers, and a lot more time to think about my life. And so I just find it to be personally apropos to talk about the shift that I have made, almost not away from meditation into prayer, but I would say that prayer right now is taking the center stage in what I would say is a complete change and leap in consciousness for me. Because in the past, I have always seen prayer as something that I pushed away. So, are you ready to dive? How are you doing?
Do it. I'm
How
good,
are you
thanks.
feeling?
I'm feeling a lot of things, as I think we're recording this just so for our viewing and listening audience. This is November 14th, 2023, and yeah, it's beautiful. Like I'm feeling good, and at the same time, I've also the last 4 6 weeks have been a lot of challenges too emotionally. I was very fortunate to not have like a physical um I even struggle to say the word illness half the time because I just wonder how much of these illnesses are really energetic, strong messages for our physical body to do things that it needs to do, but we don't put that time and energy into it. When I was knocked out in September, similar to you, Lisa, it was a very similar moment of finally of like quiet reflection, which was so nice. And we don't get enough of that. And I think the last month or so, I could probably do with some more prayer, more meditation, and more quiet contemplation. So I'm excited to talk about this today because, to be honest, I might be more on the side of our audience who needs a little bit of that boost because I've been, I think, falling out of some of my practices and some of my ways of manifesting. I feel like I've kind of gone back into some 3D thinking and stresses that feel like very old stories to me right now. So couldn't come at a better time. I'm really excited to dive
Yeah.
into this topic today because I'll probably take some notes to do for the rest of my day today slash week.
Well, I've taken a lot of notes, but what I will say is that when you and I have had this conversation, and I know that we talked a couple weeks ago and we thought we were going to do another podcast, we happen to be in sync with feeling, I would say, a level of despair for me. I mean, I felt really, we've had a podcast about Dark Night of the Soul, but I was feeling really stressed, really pulled. polarized, in a place where, you know, I couldn't see the trees through the forest. I wasn't able to, and it was a day, you know, I mean, it was a full day of, okay, let me take another deep breath. Okay, I feel okay. The next minute, I'm not feeling okay. Okay. And so that's another thing that I want to talk about today is not only thank you for, and I really want to acknowledge all the viewers and listeners that have um, taken the time to on YouTube to listen to the last podcast about breathing techniques and opening the pineal gland. And a lot of listeners were really wondering, well, can you tell us how? Like, what are the different hows? So I think by the end of this podcast, I'd really like to make sure that we circle back around and provide some of those hows, because I know that, you know, I'm a big fan of qigong breathing, but I literally was like, okay, let me find another technique. I'm not feeling good. Okay, I feel okay now. I'm at a baseline. And then all of a sudden something would come up for me. It was as if, and you brought it to my, you know, you brought this up before, but you also brought it up today, Chris, is that, is our illnesses, are they energetic? You know, are we here to going through these different initiations? And so that initiation comes through in physical discomfort. And the very last thing on a spiritual ascension of some kind, or a conscious ascension through an initiation period or progress, is that our physical body is kind of the last thing to adjust. I think you and I've had that conversation before. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's the, growing pains, right, of the spiritual journey, of the awakening process, of the, call it the enlightenment process, call it evolution of consciousness. It's all the same kind of thing, and that comes with growing pains. And I'm definitely currently going through another growing pain, which I can feel all these old stories. And for me, it's like one of my oldest programs and stories that's coming back up again, yet again. And I'm sure everyone watching and listening has their go-to trauma story, whatever you want to call it, thing that we're always struggling or having quite a bit of challenge in our life to try to really embody and overcome, and whatever that even looks like, of course, because it's very much individual. And yeah, I even recently I follow a channeler who was talking about the cosmic energies, and for a lot of people that might just sound like, well, that's just crazy, like that's just a little too ungrounded for me to comprehend. But for myself, the more I do get into the idea of everything is energy, everything is frequency, everything is vibration, so why wouldn't certain cosmological or things happening in the cosmos, why wouldn't they affect us even on a physical level? Just think about gravity, and when planets move and moons move and other shifts happen throughout our solar system, that does affect the gravity of our planet. That affects the
Yep.
blood flow in our body. That affects a lot of, like, we're basically all water. It affects the flow of the water in our body. It's still quite profound. So it's worth looking into what's happening cosmically. And I got a message this morning actually from one of the people I follow, and he was just saying how, like, one of the main things coming up right now for a lot of you might be your self-worth things, and self-worth can be attached to a lot of different things. And for me, my self-worth is attached to money. Like, I'm sure a lot of other people watching and listening to this also have that. One of the more common ones, of course. And just even seeing that come up in someone else who's, in the UK and many hours ahead of me, has no connection to me yet, he's talking about something that I'm also going through at the same time. So you really got to start wondering how collective is all this
Right.
too, and so on and so forth. So right now, although I'm hearing a lot of old programs and stories that obviously don't feel good and make me feel like, wow, if I just taken 2 steps forward and 18 steps backwards, which is what it feels like usually, it's still, I'm like, okay, but it's also literally something that's supposed to be coming up right now, according to other people. But at least those other people are in a way confirming that. I'm like, yeah, that voice isn't all me. Like, I'm sure parts of it still are there for me to heal and work through, but a lot of it feels like some old stuff that I'm like, what? Why is that still there?
Right.
And I think that that's coming up again because we're moving through we're going through yet again another initiation, and these initiations, think of it as a game, right? Where you're at the boss level in a game and you've got to like defeat this pretty substantial opponent to then move on to the next level, right? And I think that's kind of not to make it feel like we're at a war or battle or anything per se, but it's like that. That's where I feel like I'm at personally, is like I'm at the boss level again, working through it. It's a little challenging, but I can see that, okay, because this is advancing me to the next level. Let's just try to not freak out too much here and you know, fall back into these practices like you've been saying too.
Yeah, we're in this collective soup. We can't help it. We are here, we're on, we are in a three dimension, although we can have another podcast around the fact that we are in a simulation and there are multiple dimensions that we all have access to. I was listening to something pretty profound by Matthias De Stefano, and he talked about oneness and unity is actually the very first dimension. And that is one, it's singular. And from there, all other dimensions expand out from. It was really very fascinating. But we are connected, and that is part of this oneness. That's part of this unity. We can't help but feel, I think, some level of pull if we are in the collective soup and we are paying attention to what's going on right now in media. And I'm not talking about mainstream media, I'm just talking about the things that are happening in Gaza, for example. And this is not a political side at whatsoever. We are not going into politics whatsoever, but we are feeling things because we are a feeling being and we feel what other people are feeling. Even if it's just a little bit, we're still feeling that. And then we amplify it because we all have a connection. And we can't help but be a part of this, I think, very important time in humanity's evolution in order for us to springboard to the next level of consciousness. We have to do something, and I think more and more people are waking up. What I mean by that is that more and more people are deciding that they are responsible or accountable for the way that they're feeling. And more people are waking up to getting into a practice, a personal practice, whether it is meditation, whether it is breath work, whether it is prayer. And I think this is where I have been almost pulled in a direction that I never wanted to really dip my toe in. But I am being asked to take a look at things in a way that I have never really viewed before. So, as we are in this collective soup, why don't we talk about prayer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's been your experience with that right now?
Well, I grew up Catholic. I grew up in a going to church and um, being told that it's really important to be forgiven of your sins and that underneath all the layers, you come in and you're a sinner. And the only way to cleanse yourself is through to repent. And I think from when I was a very, very young child, I rejected that notion. And I had no basis at the time. And I fought with, catechism weekend, having to go to different retreats, even with my parents. And so I dove deeply into different spiritualities, different religions, and read a lot of different religion texts. And again, at a very early age, I didn't do this when I was very young, but I just felt this, I would consider it to be like an aversion. And so when I was thinking of what prayer is, I was always rejecting prayer. That notion, I just wanted to reject it all. And recently, and I would say in the last few years, I've been very curious. And then something happened in the last few weeks to make me dive deeply, much more deeply into this subject. So that's kind of how I started. And I'll go so far as to go backward. Back in 2018, I was introduced to the works of Paramahansa Yogananda. And Yogananda is very well known for a number of things. Um, a book that he wrote called The Autobiography of a Yogi. I got very interested because he was the first religious figure for me that made me think about how we can take the works of, say, the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and merge them together. That got my attention. And so that was the first kind of in entrance of prayer for me, was back in 2017, 2018, when I started to become more of a devotee of his works and his teachings. And as a very interesting little side note, he transcended in 1952, March 7th, 1952. And that is a pretty interesting correlation, because the number 17 is my favorite number, and he happened to have uh, transcended on my birthday. So there are no coincidences. There's only synchronicities. So I I wanted to dive a little deeper and just say, well, what does prayer mean? And what is the etymology? I love etymology. I want to go back into like what does this mean? So the Webster's definition of prayer is the act of making a reverent petition to God, or a god, or a deity, or another object of worship. It is a devout petition to God, thanksgiving, adoration, or confession. And then I'm like, okay, so this was like Webster Dictionary and then other, dictionaries. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the etymology. What does prayer mean? What does pray and prayer mean? And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about it, but enough to make a point. So 1300, 14th century, the word, which is more like medieval Latin, this may be predating that. It's called priere, is an earnest request or petition. Precaria is to obtain a prayer given as a favor, to ask, to beg. Preien, it's Preien. I may not be pronouncing that right. Is to ask earnestly, to beg. And I thought that's probably one of the reasons why I never really subscribed to prayer, because of it being based on begging. And at the core, I was always almost almost like revolted by it, right? Uh, but what's interesting is that Yogananda has a very different definition of what prayer means. And he wrote that the definition of prayer is a demand of the soul. And he says that until we have full self realization, we need um, we need help to bring us closer to attaining it, which is why in his self realization fellowships, by the way, I think I said service, but it's self realization fellowships, is their practice of bringing people closer to attaining self realization. So, Chris, do you want to say anything? Because I'm like I'm ready to like take off here, but before I do, is there anything you want to say about what I
Um,
just?
yeah, I mean, there's so many things, but maybe just to make it quick here, I've had a similar, weirdly similar upbringing with prayer and the whole concept of that because although I wasn't brought up Catholic, I was brought up atheist actually more than anything. Brought up science, scientism, or science is the religion, right? And materialism probably would be like the religion almost more than anything. And so obviously I rejected religion right from the get-go because of a lot of different things. And of course, with anything in life, there's always something to gain and to glean and to learn from anything, as terrible as some of these things could be. Because especially with religion, although it has taken the form of a lot of things that most people aren't gonna, love, like controlling and oppression and wars and all that stuff that have come from religion. There's obviously such a foundation of spirituality and such an amazing foundation of literal, just practical tools and techniques that all of us can take. When you read any religious text, that's what a lot of the text actually just refers to, is how to have that self-realization, or that reconnection with self, and which is source, which is God, which is all of those same things. So there's a lot to, especially in my recent last 5 to 10 years of research, coming from it as a, atheist turned agnostic turned spiritual, whatever you want to call the category. It's been a really amazing journey to kind of come back and look at these concepts known as prayer, and looking at it with a different light. Because for me, prayer, and I know there's a difference, and we probably will get into that, where I started to look at prayer as similar to affirmation. And with affirmation, it isn't that begging frequency, which is a frequency of a lower vibration. And I've heard other people talk about, when you're wanting to manifest and bring things into reality, power responds to power, strength responds to strength. And when you're sharp, sharp, like steel sharpens steel. So it's that idea of, when you want to bring something into reality, if you beg, it's coming at it from a very low frequency. So what are you really going to be bringing in with that low frequency, versus if you command it or demand it, that's coming from a much more higher frequency, a more powerful frequency. And likely what's going to materialize is going to be probably a lot more in resonance and alignment with where you're at, but also what you ultimately need then. So let's dive into it. I'm just as
Yeah,
curious to
you're
learn,
saying it.
you
You're
know?
saying it. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, when I heard Yogananda say, a demand of the soul, I'm like, okay, this is getting somewhere. This is not the normal, what we would put and attach prayer with, right? I mean, for me, I have a visual, um, and it may be very judgmental visual when I put prayer next to something or someone. And I've always felt like, well, that doesn't really associate with me. I'll stay in meditation. But for my own conscious um, acceleration and upliftment, I need to open up that, or, to look under the rug. Like, what is that really? What is it that I'm not comfortable in?
Well, it's like, why
And
have we
so,
done it?
yeah,
Why have we done it for thousands and thousands of years? It's similar
right.
to meditation, where it's like prayer and meditation have been around for so long. There might be a reason for that.
Well, and I think we're going to, on our next episode, is actually just have a conversation all about meditation. And then I would love to have a conversation about, like, what's the difference between the two? And that should be interesting. So I wanted to know, what does it mean to demand of the soul? And What Paramahansa Yogananda says is that God didn't create us to be beggars. God created humans in the image of God, and therefore one must behave as the son or the daughter to receive of God, right? To receive full realization and have everything that we ask for. And we have to not behave like a beggar. And I would say that the word in and of itself is defined as to ask, to beg, right? Um, to make a reverent petition to separate from. And I'm sure that many people who are listening have been brought up to be conditioned to feel unworthy, right? We have to ask for forgiveness for our sins. And we can't get what we want unless we do. But if we act as a beggar, we're going to receive a beggar's share. And if we act like sons and daughters of God, we will receive what is really our birthright.
Because we are the extensions of God, of source, right? So literally
Right.
we are that. And when we forget that, which is, and I'm in a
Right.
process of, I wake up and I sometimes am forgetting it these days, and I'll be honest, right? And that's when I fall back into this human beggar program, because ultimately it's a story that we've absolutely been programmed to believe for many thousands of years. And it's easy to fall back into that. And at the same time, when you talk about this way of like, of course it makes sense when you say the words, it makes sense. And it's like, how can we continually remind ourselves of this godly power that we have within ourselves? And I would imagine prayer is one of the great ways to kind of, almost like, it's the programming. That is part of what's helping
It's
you
the
refocus,
programming.
right?
It's the programming. And the program keeps on regenerating itself until a new narrative takes change. And given that we are all about on this channel of diving in and seeing what sticks and what we can do to shift the consciousness of our own personal perspective, maybe that will also resonate with some of you listeners. Um, just to go on a little bit about what Paramahansa Yogananda said about this even further is that, somebody can be extraordinarily wealthy and still be a beggar because they simply want more and more and more because they never feel that they're enough. And yet there are so many people who have very little who are very fulfilled and content with life. So the question is what I wrote for myself. And I'm going to ask this in a way of bringing you, the audience, in, is can you embrace um, the following? He who needs nothing is a king. Can you embrace that? He who needs nothing is a king. And I feel like for me, when I changed my status of prayer to become a child of God and not as a beggar, and to pray for legitimate things, and not like I want to be the richest person in the whole world, right? That's not legitimate. I'm not saying that I don't want material, but if all of our desires are based on materialism and a material life, it's very limited. But I'm asking myself about this is that if I change the way that I see myself, then I'm going to be shifting my consciousness, and therefore my prayers will be both powerful and wise, meaning I will have power and wisdom both. And the last part about this, and then like I'd love to open this up a little bit, Chris, is that God responds to our prayers through our willpower. That's what Yogananda said, and I loved that. Yogananda says, in willpower lies the germ of success. And what he means by that is we don't pray and sit idle, which I think so many people do. He said we have to do our part to manifest our prayers. We have to be channels of God's will.
I love that. That's so important because that's the thing that I think a lot of people either in the spiritual community or who are new to this way of being, but they probably are going to hear a lot of pop culture phrasing around this where it can be it can also seem like that magic bullet solution to just say a bunch of these things and then it's taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
in some regards, it kind of is, but at the same time, we're in a physical material reality. Therefore, we have to follow it up with a physical material action of some kind, right?
Right, right.
To balance that out, to bring something from the non-material in the material requires the physicality. That's why on earth would we be in these bodies if, for that reason alone. So it's important. That's such a good point. Is like, what are you still, and not taking action from the old paradigm of hustle, 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 grind, 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 but from
Right.
like, from a healthy place of action where it's that, there's many terms used for that, but it's when it feels like that, right? That impulse, right? We all know that feeling of like, oh, I gotta call this person. I gotta go outside and do this thing. I gotta walk here. I gotta, whatever that thing is. It could be the most basic, or it could be more profound. Like, I gotta put together this event. You know what? I'm gonna start that business thing I've been thinking about, but it just came in so hot and heavy. I gotta do it. So I think it's a beautiful way to look at that, right? Where we've got the energetics, which come in the form of like prayer as an example, right? What are we putting out into the ether? But then also, what are we actually doing to physically bring that in, right?
Right. And so you and I talk about affirmations all the time. And what is prayer? Prayer is a thought or thoughts or a series of thoughts. And we know that thoughts are things. We know that thoughts have energy. And if we are begging for something because we are sitting in a place that is in fear, right? False evidence appearing real. If we are ego driven, right? Edging God out. If we are sitting in a place of scarcity, our vibrational frequency will also emanate that out, and we are going to get more of the same. So the beauty of understanding prayer in this way is that I think that if we can become enthused, right? When we're our body through our own thoughts become the unfoldment of excitement. And that's part of I think that the willpower is to believe it, is to be like, now, I'm not saying that God or a source or the creator is saying your wish is my command. Although maybe people think about that. That may be true. I haven't experienced that in my life at this moment, but when we have an intention to bring prayer to fruition through trust, that changes the constellation of our energetic field. And I think that the problem happens when people say, well, my prayers don't get answered. Well, prayers don't happen typically as soon as we open our eyes from a prayer. We have to continue holding the space and that higher vibrational frequency, even if we don't see it, right? I think that's what you're saying, Chris.
Yeah, and I've heard from others too the analogy of it's like you put your order in, but there's got to process that order. Like even Amazon doesn't, it's not instant yet, right? So it's there's time, and maybe when you get really better, it's like you've up, not to, I'm not promoting Amazon, FYI, but I'm just using it as an analogy. It's like you've
No,
upgraded from a regular customer, to the Prime. Prime's like 1 day delivery, right? And I'm sure there's these stepping stones we can make with manifestation, absolutely. But my current understanding is similar to yours, Lisa, where it really is. There is this phenomenon, crazy enough, called time, that we do have to still take into consideration, even though, and we can get into this in other episodes, what is time? Is it an illusion, etc.?
time doesn't exist.
It
Right,
doesn't
right.
exist. And at the same time, we're playing the game. And in this
We're
game,
playing the game, and if we're
there's a
in a
thing called time.
matrix, then we actually have it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Until we
That's the
get out
fun,
of the matrix, that's a whole nother conversation to be
the
had. But
paradox.
yes, yes. But I think that it requires prayer and being able to be okay with whatever happens after our prayers. Meaning, as long as I think it requires our hearts to be open. I think that when we sit in gratitude, which is why I love the 369 affirmation that Tesla did, that's like all over the internet right now. And I've been doing that. I know you've been doing that too, Chris, is when we feel gratitude as if our prayers have already been answered, we've already amplified it. And I guess you can go back to, if we're ordering something online or if we're ordering something at a restaurant,
Yeah.
right? We ordered a filet or we ordered a pasta dish. We're not going to come back and get corn on the cob. We kind of trust that what we're ordering, we're going to get pretty close to what we ordered. And I think prayer is very similar to that. We don't stop and order something at a restaurant and then just worry that we're not going to get what we ordered. So if we can make it that simple and playful and lighthearted and definitely in a space of gratitude. And that's one of the things about the 369 affirmation. Call it a prayer, call it an affirmation, but I'm in it and I feel amazing and I stand up and down and I'm excited and I smile and I make myself, regardless of how I'm feeling, I make myself feel how excited I am about these affirmations coming to fruition.
And for our
And
audience,
yeah,
could we just give them a quick breakdown, just like
yes,
a bullet point
yes.
of what that is?
So the 369 that I know, this is how I'm working it, is that I create 3 affirmations. I do it 6 times a day. I speak it aloud. I do it for 90 or 9 seconds each affirmation. And then I do that every day for 9 days.
So 3 affirmations, 6 times a day, and then 9 seconds,
9 seconds for each affirmation. Now, I mean, that's
roughly.
why I can't be really detailed, right? You can't,
Yeah.
that's part of my problem. Like, I want to say everything I want to say. And it's like the universe already knows, God already knows. But if you emphasize something, right? Whether it's you want money to pay for your bills, whether it is you want, the person of your dreams to show up, whether it is that, you want to get a scholarship for school, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever it is that you want, you pick 3 and you just be so enthusiastic about it as if it already happened. As if it already happened. And if it already happens, guess what? That's half the, if you believe that it's already happened, then you just sit back, kind of like sitting on a plane. You know that you're going to go to your destination. You sit back and you just let it happen. And you don't knock on the door or even get close to the pilot room and say, "When are we going to be there?" Like kids do. You're going on a long trip. You're going. You got a
Are we
10
there
hour
yet?
drive. In the first 30 minutes, you're like, Mom and Dad, are we there yet? Right? It doesn't work that way. Prayer is the same. So I'm using affirmations in this 369 affirmations and doing it very short. So 9 seconds goes by really fast. Get your phone, know how short that is, and do it for 9 days. I can guarantee that your life will alter in the most profound and positive way. And it may be subtle, but it may end up being very, very amazing.
Let us know in the comments, everybody. Like, what? Try it out. Let us know. How do you feel? You know, this is a feedback loop because your comments also help other people who are commenting right now, as well as we're seeing.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful feedback loop. Most of the time, it's not even our responses that are the beautiful ones. I'm reading other people chiming in on other people's comments, and so all about the community of learning. I have a question for you, Lisa. So, for the last couple of months, I know we've gone through some pretty challenging ups and downs, and I obviously we're not the only ones. It's all collective. So for everyone else that is maybe currently going through a real downward energetic phase in their life, and things are feeling heavy, things are feeling really, really challenging, and you know those days, and we all know what those feel like when you're just like you're trying the things, the tools, and you're like, yeah, and yeah, not really
Yeah.
feeling the greatest and not exactly feeling that joy that I know I can feel, but where is it? Where is it today? We've all had those days. What would you say? Because these things are still important, and on those days, it's like those are the days you got to lean into those practices, but they still might not feel the same as other days. What would you say to the average person, listener, viewer, if they're moving through that right now?
Yeah. My dad has always said this to me since I was a little girl. And whenever I've gone through something very difficult, he would say, "This too shall pass." And when I was younger, I was like, "You don't get it." You know, it's really difficult. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that there is so much truth in that. If if you can breathe through the moment, and even if it's breathing through every minute, and if you can possibly be grateful for even being able to breathe, that you don't have to think about it, that we live in a physical vehicle called the body, and we don't really have to do anything to make it work. It's called the body intelligence. If we can find something very small, whether it is our partner or our child or the fact that the sun is shining, something in gratitude, that will absolutely help quicken the process of getting out of what doesn't feel good. And that sometimes is the most painful thing to do, is to try to find something that we're grateful for when we are in the midst of feeling totally crappy, totally negative, feeling like we cannot breathe. And I know this very well personally. I know it very well. And sometimes it means crying versus keeping it all together. Sometimes it means hitting your pillow when you're angry, but I know it'll pass because it always does. And the reason that I know that is because, listener, viewer, if you're listening to this, that means that you have had to overcome a lot of obstacles in your life, because being here is not easy at all. Being on this earth plane in this time is very difficult. And for some, for many, it's got moments or a lot of moments of being super painful. But if you're here, you've already overcome things. That's what I would say.
I love
That
that.
you're going to get through it. You're going to get through it. Um, there's two things that I wanted to say, and this is going back to prayer. We don't pray to have our answers. to have our prayers answered. I think that we pray as if our prayers have already been answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're
It's like
changing.
we're not waiting around for it, right? And even if the prayer was like, okay, I just got through the day. Again, you and I talked about this many times. I do not go to sleep until I have put on my phone to my friend who's my accountability partner every single night. I list 7 to 10 things I'm grateful for the day. And in the last couple weeks, when things were really difficult, and I'm like laying in bed going, I can't come up with anything. I don't know okay. All right. I'm breathing. I am going to sleep early, right? I mean, find something. Okay. That's what I will say with that. And then there's one other thing, but I'll come up with it. I'll say it in a minute before we end.
Okay. I
What
have,
would you say? What
yeah.
what what is your kind of go to, or what would you say to the listener or viewer in the midst of real challenging moments?
Well, similar to you, certainly would echo everything you said. Absolutely. And I'll add in again, this beautiful reality that we're living in is physical and multidimensional. So, what are physical things that we can do as well? And I find different forms of movement extraordinarily helpful
Yes.
when I'm going through like the heavy stuff. For me personally, it is a physical thing. It's sometimes the kind of physicality where I'm like, I can't move. I'm so depressed. I am immobilized. But that is a physical outcome and a reaction from an emotional state, energetic state. So what can what do I do when I'm immobilized with whatever that might be, depression, etc.? Well, then I'll forgive myself immediately and love myself as best as I can in that moment for not being able to move or do anything. Because they usually sometimes fall on days where I'm like, I wanted to do all of this stuff, and now I can't do any of it. That's okay. So then I'll still get physical though and be like, well, I can't really move, but I can breathe. Maybe I'll do some breath work. Great. I'll start to use oxygen, which is literally a drug in a sense that we can all, or a medicine maybe as a better word, that we can all literally get high on and help us move from one state to another, which is amazing. So even when I can't move, let's do some breath work. Let's use that oxygen. Another thing too is, and I've really been getting into this, is like the consciousness of water. I mean, when you actually dive into this idea, and this is a whole other podcast, but basically when you actually break down our molecular structure, we're 99% water. We're not 70% water. We're 99% water. So I even recently, I'm like, well, I've got no energy, but I've got some natural spring water I can drink, and I'll just really drink the nicest water I can possibly drink today. And that can evolve into the like food you eat. Maybe you're like, I'm feeling so bad today, but I also try to switch that and be like, well, let's say this was my partner or my child or my grandmother or grandfather. What would I say to them? I'd be like, can I make you a nice meal or something? Like these are the self-care things I try to do. And the last thing I'll add in with the physicality side that I find really helpful is then the opposite of when I'm depressed, where if I'm angry or frustrated with something, exercise is just
Yep.
the best thing. And that can be anything. That could be going for a walk, a hike, a run, yoga, CrossFit. I don't care. Does not matter. Soccer, basketball, irrelevant. It's just whatever excites you, whatever sport or activity that you really gravitate towards, that feels good, and just literally like just lean into that. I've had some funny moments where I thought I just needed to go for a walk, so I went outside, and it's fall in Vancouver here, so it's off and on rainy season. And I went outside and it was rainy and I'm feeling like crap, and I'm just like, yeah, I just got to run. It was nighttime, it's dark, it was just pitch black, rain. I'm like, I'm gonna run, and I literally just ran for 20 minutes aimlessly around my neighborhood, and I felt like by the end of it, I felt like I was literally playing a video game and I was getting more and more out of my body as I was running and being like, turn left, turn right. And I'm like playing this game where I'm the avatar running through the streets of Vancouver in the crazy rain and I'm just drenched. And I came in after that. I was like, I feel much better.
There you go.
Not as pissed
I
off
don't,
anymore.
I mean, you don't have to buy anything to do something like that.
No.
I would love for us to provide the viewers with a couple of breath techniques because that
Wonderful.
seems to be a big deal. Um, and it is, right? So that's another thing. What can you do when you're not feeling good? Breathe. I mean, find something in this breath work. So um, there is the breath of fire. I love the breath of fire. It's a little bit more intricate. You could definitely YouTube it. I like taking a deep breath in through my nose and then breathing out through my mouth, but doing super, super, super deep breaths. And then once you're breathing all the way up, all the way up, all the way up through your nose, and it literally goes to the top of your head, and you hold it for a minute, and then you breathe everything out, and you exhale, 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 all the way out, all the way through your tummy, and you breathe out through your mouth, all the way out. You do that like 3 times. What I've noticed is that I get a little bit, I wouldn't say lightheaded, but like everything kind of starts to tingle. And I shift. Well, why? Why is that? Well, physiologically, we've just actually entered a completely different way in which our breath, we're like reintroducing more air, right? We're totally cutting off the cortisol chemicals that we're feeding, right, our minds and our bodies. And we've physiologically shifted when we do some different breath work techniques such as that. Or, the breath of fire is like, and it's all through the nose, right? But you do it, and I think a lot of times you hold your arms up or something like that, and
Many
I think
ways.
you hold your arms up. I mean, there's so many
Many
different
ways.
ways, but like and you do it for like 3 minutes or something like that, just
Many
like.
rounds too. There's many combinations of this technique.
And then you stop, and then you get to a normal breath. I could tell you that your entire, whatever it is that you've been thinking, whatever you were holding on to, will completely shift. So we will put in the comments a few different techniques, and we'll put little links to where you can find those. I know that we've got a couple of episodes that actually talk about different breathing techniques. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the Qigong breathing technique. I've been doing it for years,
Yeah.
and that is the way in which I'm breathing. And I'm having to be, in particular, I am like, because of having to go through almost 6 weeks of being down and out, my lungs are really sensitive right now. I can't believe it. I've always been really healthy, but because my lungs are sensitive, now I'm having to like make some adjustments to my breathing techniques because what I was doing before doesn't quite feel so good. So listen to your body intelligence. I mean, it's really, really important. I think getting back to prayer and getting back to one thing that I wrote here, and it was just a line from the book, The Little Prince. Just such a beautiful book.
Great book.
It's not just for children, it's actually it's for adults.
Mhm.
And this one line says, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." Prayer is invisible. The manifestation of those prayers can come in the visible. But in order to attain a level of peace and harmony and really be in a state of fulfillment and love and gratitude, that is done and received and felt in the invisible. They're not tangible. So our next session podcast, I think we're going to talk about meditation because I'm deeply interested in understanding both of these individually and then how they can be combined or even um, brought into one. Is there anything, Chris, that you want to say before we end to our viewers?
Well, those are all a lot of good stuff in here, and this is great and therapeutic for myself. So, as always, these podcasts are a two-way street. You know, we really are striving and enjoying sharing this knowledge with all you wonderful people watching and listening. And selfishly, I get my little therapy session basically when we record these podcasts. So I really enjoyed our conversation, really took a lot of what we were both talking about. I'm taking this as well, just as much as we encourage you, beautiful people, to take these ideas and concepts and see where they can lead you and see where it resonates with you. I'm doing the same thing. So I'm excited to bring some more prayer into my life. And I have to work on that word because of, again, my upbringing has all these, programs around just a simple word like prayer, right? Where I just need to switch that judgment and that prejudice that I have towards it, and because of my upbringing, and bring some more of that, because what we were talking about today really resonated with me, and I'm realizing that there are some gaps that can certainly be filled with these tools and techniques, and for everyone watching, it is a combination. It's a combination of all of these things and more, and you, the individual, are going to have your own individual combination of all of these things. So everything we talked about, you're going to have your own version of that. So that's also what we encourage, is to empower you to really go inward and see, like, okay, but yeah, what works for me? What's the best for me? I got all this external information coming at me from, Wisdom from the Edge podcast and a billion other things online in the world, right? What am I going to do with it? What resonates with me? And ultimately, the best judge of that, which is what we talked about just now, is the heart. Your heart is going to tell you what is in full alignment for yourself. Your brain, amazing tool that your brain is, and it is a wonderful piece of machinery, computer that we have. However, the brain only works from the past. It can only analyze and take in information that is already experienced. So therefore, it's challenging to move forward and work into the future with only your brain. Oh, I'll figure it out in the future. Well, maybe we don't want to figure it out. Maybe we want to feel it out in the future and use our hearts to really push ourselves forward. And the brains can work more with the past and then analyze and organize and put all things into that beautiful order. But I think moving forward and knowing when we have those questions in these darker moments of, like, what am I doing? How do I get here? How do I change my life in whatever way I'm looking for? The answer is going to lie, in your heart. So just do what you can to tune into that wisdom and that brain, and let us know in the comments, where does that take you, and how do these tools and techniques that we shared with you today, what has that done for you, and how do you feel after having tried some of these? Please let us know. We'd love to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for sharing this time together. And as always, just your energetic presence just lifts us all. And I feel it, even though we're pretty far away from each other. um, in physical form, I definitely feel your energetic presence. And as well as you, listener, viewer, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for viewing us and leaving your comments. We're super grateful, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, everyone.
Namaste.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Wisdom from the Edge. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And make sure, if you haven't already, to follow, like, and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. It actually helps us out quite a lot in growing this platform. And also leave us a comment if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts about what you enjoyed on this episode and things that you want to offer, maybe ideas for a new episode or things that you want to hear more about. Also, make sure to check out our website, wisdomfromtheedge.org. All that is in the description below. And you can learn more about what we do, what offerings we have, and of course, the courses and programs. There's lots to learn from, a lot of really cool resources to check out to enhance your everyday life. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wisdom from the Edge.